Beethoven's most famous piece of music. Although, interestingly, it was not really discovered, it was not published until 40 years after his death. Someone found that the little 3 pages of paper, I think it was in a closet or someone's desk. It is one of his little bagatelles, his little trifles, although most of us know it by the dedication that is in Beethoven's handwriting at the top of the page. You have it in your program here. It says, Für Elise, on the 27th of April, to remember your Ludwig van Beethoven. I have no idea who Elise was. There are a few theories out there. You can go down that Wikipedia wormhole if you choose. That was a little prelude to the 6 Bagatelles that I'll play for you next. Like I said, these are his last works that he composed for the piano. These are written in 1823, 1824. So Beethoven was in his 50s, and by this time he had been completely deaf for at least, 5 or 10 years. Beethoven realized when he was 30, 31 years old that he was having serious problems, serious hearing loss. And, this would be terrible for any of us, in our early 30s to go through. But for him, it came right at the moment when he was realizing his life stream of being the world's great musician. He really was, the talk of the town in Vienna. Vienna was the center of the musical universe at that time. And, Beethoven was not just known for his sort of daring music that he composed, but also for his incredible performances. He was apparently a virtuoso like none other. It wasn't just that his fingers would fly, but apparently, even in the slow stuff, you felt like his soul was speaking to you. People even say that the highlights of his concerts were almost invariably his improvisation. And that's an interesting thing to consider, because nowadays, I think most of us associate improvisation with the world of like jazz and guitar solos, and it's just helpful to remember that, 200 years ago, this is how they sort of earned their daily bread. All of them were versed in this world of improv. So these 6 bagatelles are things that Beethoven was working on while he was finishing up his 9th symphony. His 9th symphony is his biggest thing that he put out. It's a symphony over an hour long. Usually there's over 100 people on stage. It's an immense production. It took him a lot of time and a lot of effort. So the fact that he simultaneously created these 6 little sort of miniatures for the piano, some of them are just a page long, it's a little bit funny. It's like he needed something to balance out his brain a little bit. These pieces are intended to be played as a cycle, so you have 1 through 6 sort of creating a little narrative arc, even though they are their own little pieces. They have their own little soul, as it were. Later in the 1800s, in what we call the Romantic era, composers kind of seized on this idea, and there are countless examples of Chopin. For example, Chopin's preludes follow this same model of little miniatures that are strung together. Other composers like Schumann and Mendelssohn and Grieg, it's like the list goes on. But in 1820, when Beethoven did this, it was not a sort of a normal sort of thing to put out. But Beethoven did publish these. Apparently he needed to make some money because he was broke after the 9th Symphony production. And he tried to publish a set of bagatelles earlier, but this is kind of hilarious and kind of sad. But someone got a hold of a pirated copy of the music and published it first. So Beethoven literally didn't make any money off of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But because of that, he wrote these, so that's good. So tonight, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into these bagatelles and then later the quartet. Both of them are short pieces, about 20 minutes of music, but it is so densely packed with interesting stuff that it's worth taking a moment just to share some of it. So I'm going to lead you through these step by step. If you have a program, you'll notice that Beethoven, the first thing that he gives the pianist are these little directions, and that's why it's numbered 1 through 6. And these directions are mostly about how fast to play. Typically a composer would write Allegro if they wanted you to go fast, Adagio if they wanted you to go slow, or maybe something in the middle like moderato. Anyway, Beethoven, as you can see, gets a little more particular than that. For the first one, he writes, for example, andante con moto, cantabile e compiacevole. That's a lot of words. Andante means just going along. Usually we refer to it as a kind of a walking sort of pace. Con moto with a little motion, so maybe a little more like that. Cantabile is with a singing tone. And then this word I love the most, compiacevole, is like contentedness. And that is just a great image to have in my mind as I start this first little bagatelle. And I'll just show you what I mean. It is so peaceful and calm, and perhaps you were expecting this typical Beethoven thunder to drum over your head. But one of the things that happened to Beethoven late in his life is his music did turn a little more internal and introspective. Surely that was at least partially a factor of his deafness. You know, he was increasingly isolated when he couldn't communicate well. He couldn't really perform anymore. And a lot of his music sort of turns into more of an exploration of psychological states, as opposed to just sort of music for entertainment. Beethoven really wanted to hook us in. One thing that's amazing about this little phrase is, despite how balanced and elegant it is, there are some elements of imbalance. For example, at the beginning he wants a long, smooth touch. He puts a long line over the notes until the last two notes, and then he puts a dot and a dot. And so you have this imbalance of smoothness with punctuation. You can hear it too. And then as it goes on, he does something similar, but this time he wants a very long crescendo where it gets louder steadily, and then right at the end a very quick diminuendo, so it goes away. Something about those elements give it that kind of self-assured feeling. So anyway, oh wait, there's one more thing about this one. In the second part, things get a little weird. They don't start out weird. They start out pretty normal. It's like, what happened there? It's like the music takes a little bit of a wrong turn, and you know, the rhythm changes, he gets sort of hooked on one idea and repeats it, and then something really amazing happens. It turns into one of his sort of trademark improvisation moments, which is pretty unexpected for page 1. These strange little detours are going to be a part of tonight's evening. They're throughout these bagatelles. It's not just that he changes character rapidly, it's that he is sort of pushing the boundaries of how music can work. You know, oh, you think you're going to expect something pretty straightforward? Just wait, you know? Take, for example, the second of these bagatelles. Here, the idea of contrast is right at the front of the music. So you have completely opposite things. You have old hammer fingers rolling away there, and then you have something that's like, I don't know, like a breath of air that comes in the room, and it's completely different. And then over the course of 3 pages of that second bagatelle, he tries to find ways to integrate these two ideas. It doesn't always work very well. There's an interruption that happens in this one. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it is an interruption of silences, which is kind of hard to play. Never mind. It's wonderful though. The third one is perhaps my favorite of the Bagatelles. Here in the third one, Beethoven creates a mood and he basically stays in it. It's a warm and sort of heartfelt mood. He writes, it's again andante, so it's moving just a bit, but he writes cantabile e grazioso. So cantabile is the singing tone, and here he wants grazioso, just with a little bit of gracefulness. In this one, there is also a moment where he just almost comes off the rails, and there's little improvisations. They swoop up and down. There's that trademark trill, you know, where just the trill emerges. That's kind of like a signal that something improvisatory is coming. In the fourth one, Beethoven says Presto. This one has been the bane of my existence for a few weeks now, just because it's hard. But I still love it. It is in the stern key of B minor, and it has all of these funny little accents in it. There are moments where he lifts the key to B major, and he seems to be so thrilled that he doesn't change chords at all for like 2 pages. It's just the same. And again, you're thinking like, what is he getting at? You know, it's interesting. You can find reviews of Beethoven's music and his performances from these times, and a lot of them are bad reviews. People did not get it. They thought that he had kind of lost his mind, maybe lost his touch, lost his talent. I mean, he was certainly not trying to follow all the rules.
Yeah.
But you know, on the surface, it is still normal music. You know, it's just has abnormal moments, I guess. The fifth of the Bagatelles, where are we? Oh, this is a good one. For this one, he writes quasi Allegretto, which I find kind of hilarious. Allegretto is like Allegro. Allegro means fast. Allegretto means kind of fast. You know. And then he writes quasi Allegretto. So that's sort of kind of fast. To be honest, I don't really know what he means, but I know it's not supposed to be fast. You know, we had, before we started this tour, the quartet and I had a week of a residency up in the mountains at a beautiful farm. We'll tell you about that later. But at one point I was talking to one of the neighbors who came by to talk about music. She's an actor and she's a musician, and she's 6 years old. And so I was telling her about this one, and I said, this first part, imagine it, it's like a dance of the elves. But I said they're more like Tolkien's elves. You know, they have this kind of stature and grace, but like a hint of sadness behind them. And I think she got it. And then later there's a part where the dance changes, and I told her that was maybe fairies. It's a different part of the woods. This helped for 2 reasons. First of all, it helped me sort of clarify what I wanted. I wanted a little bit of this kind of dance element, kind of folksy maybe. And second of all, this girl loves elves and fairies, so she is now a Beethoven fan. The Sixth Bagatelle it really captures everything about these pieces and sort of forces it into the same room. It starts with this Presto, which is just a kind of a wall of noise for about 5 seconds. And then it changes to the next part, which is andante amabile e con moto. So here we are, andante again, but this time it's andante amabile, with a kind of a loving heart, or like a warm, loving touch. That is a nice image. And the music he gives is almost impressionistic. He asked me to hold the pedal down and stretch out all of the chords. Then it changes and it becomes like a chorale, like some singers in a church or something. it's a little flippant almost flippant, you know? It's like, as soon as you feel like Beethoven is treading on territory that is too melodramatic, he withdraws from that and tries to offer you some comedy instead. At the end of this, he really plays on that kind of impressionistic soundscape, and just in case any of you have managed to nod off, he concludes the last bagatelle with that Presto, that kind of wall of noise, just to, you know, just to take it to you one more time. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.